We've also delivered for all Floridians much-needed economic relief. Due to the excessive spending and printing of money by the federal government, Americans are living through the worst period of sustained inflation in decades. We've worked together to reduce the pain of inflation by enacting over $1 billion in tax relief in this current year's budget and by slashing tolls by 50% for Florida commuters for this calendar year. That will save some families more than $1,000. Thank you, legislature, for stepping up for our consumers. Florida is proud to stand for law and order. We are tough on crime, and we support the men and women of law enforcement. And we have made it very clear to prosecutors who believe they can disregard the law, you will be held accountable. Thanks to action of the legislature, we enacted a recruitment bonus program to recruit law enforcement officers from other states, and that program has surpassed expectations. Joining us today is Officer Mercedes Phillips from the Cape Coral Police Department. She was able to take advantage of this program, received a $5,000 signing bonus this summer, leaving Montgomery County, Maryland, now working in Cape Coral. And guess what? She got here just in time for the hurricane. But she wouldn't trade what she's done, and she's made a great move. So thank you for your service, and we're happy to have you in Florida. We believe that borders matter, and we have fought against illegal immigration in the state of Florida, from banning sanctuary cities to suing the Biden administration over its catch and release policies to transporting illegal aliens to sanctuary jurisdictions. We have put Floridians first, and we will continue to do that. We've also provided robust support for K-12 education. We have enacted record increases in teacher salaries. We've expanded school choice, and we have protected the rights of parents. Joining us here today is Takesha Barrow, a fifth-grade teacher from Renaissance Charter School in Wellington and a U.S. Army veteran. She had to leave the teaching profession for a time being. Part of the reason she came back is because we were increasing salaries, and so she's brought her U.S. Army experience back into the classroom. So thank you for what you do every day for our students. God bless. And I do think if you look at how other things are going on by using the economy to advance a political agenda, we have this idea of ESG, environment, social governance, which is basically just a veneer for people to use banks, financial institutions, the economy to advance an ideological agenda. And it's an agenda that is trying to impose really leftism on the country. They've gone after gun owners, dealers. They go after people that they don't like to try to marginalize them. So we've actually been one of the leading states in fighting back against that. We're going to enact protections for Floridians against being discriminated against by these big financial institutions based on your religious practices, your political affiliation, because it seems that this is a one-way ratchet where they're trying to marginalize people on the other side of the political spectrum. So this central bank digital currency is, I think, a huge part, but it's only one part of an overall movement to try to use the levers of economic power to control society and to impose an agenda on society. Mind you, an agenda that would not be able to win at the ballot box in society. So these are people that are trying to make an end run around that process, and they want to be able to impose their worldview on our society without being held accountable by any type of an electorate, and that is wrong. And this idea of a central bank digital currency is also wrong.
Part of the rule of law, part of public safety means that you have strong borders and that you're enforcing your immigration laws. If you look at what's happened over the past many years, we're seeing a deluge of fentanyl pouring in to our country. They say only the border town should care about it. I'll tell you, every state's a border state. Pennsylvania's getting fentanyl, Florida's getting fentanyl, and I'm just sick of having to console mothers who are losing kids because they're lacing this stuff with fentanyl, and they maybe make one mistake, and then all of a sudden they lose a child. Biden laughs about fentanyl. He was talking about one family, and he was chuckling the other day there. He doesn't care about the amount of drugs that are pouring across the border. He's not doing anything. He doesn't care about the criminal aliens that are pouring across the border. I mean, people like Maduro in Venezuela, they're emptying jails, and they're sending folks to our southern border. You have people on the terror watch list that are coming across the southern border. That's just not me saying it. That's Biden's own DHS saying that. We even had people affiliated with the CCP coming across our southern border. So this is something that I think states should be responding to. Obviously, the federal government should be doing it. But in Florida, we've leaned in on day one against illegal immigration. They told me, you can't do that in Florida because we have a lot of Hispanic voters there. And I can tell you this, we've been very tough on immigration, and the people that have supported me the most have been Latino voters in the state of Florida. They want strong borders. They want the rule of law enforced. So we've done things like ban sanctuary cities in the state of Florida. We sued Biden, and we have won at the district court level against his catch and release policies because they're not legal. We also have to deal with people trying to come directly into Florida by sea. And so we have boats coming from Haiti or Cuba. And yeah, the Coast Guard, it's their responsibility, and they by and large do a really good job, but they're undermanned. Biden doesn't want to send as many ships as we need. So we're now under a state of emergency where I've marshaled all of Florida's marine resources. We're out there interdicting these boats, working with the Coast Guard, and so far in the last 6 months, we've repatriated 11,000 illegal aliens back to Haiti and back to some of these places. But the frustrating thing about all this is that you don't get much attention, certainly from Biden's administration, the corporate media. A lot of people just don't want to, they want to pretend that this problem doesn't exist. The only time I saw any of these folks get concerned about illegal immigration was when 50 illegal aliens showed up in beautiful Martha's Vineyard. Then they got really upset about it. They don't care that these poor border towns have thousands and thousands of people going through, that the cartels are running the show. They don't care about that. But when you have 50 show up in one of the wealthiest enclaves in the world, an enclave, mind you, that billed itself as a sanctuary jurisdiction. They actually had an office in their little downtown that said, nobody's illegal, we accept everyone from around the world. That's what they were advertising, and yet when they had 50 show up, did they integrate them in the community? No. They called out the National Guard and they deported them off Martha's Vineyard the next day. These liberal elites want to impose their policies on you, but they don't want to have to deal with the consequences of their ideology or their policies. And we were able to expose that. Texas has exposed it by sending to Manhattan and some of these other places. But I think if what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We shouldn't have open borders, but if the left is imposing open borders, then the illegals should go to sanctuary jurisdictions, not to Florida, not to Pennsylvania. And a big part of the solution, no doubt, is the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. You need to have a wall because if you don't, you always could have an administration that doesn't care about enforcing it. The wall is a fact of life. People can't just get over it. They try to go around when you don't have the wall completed. And so what I've told people is, we have some experience in construction in Florida. We just had a major hurricane come through Southwest Florida. Some of you may know people down there, have family or friends down there. Major hurricane, and among other things, it knocked out bridges going to Pine Island and the Sanibel Island. The causeway was severed in 3 different places. Now, these were not state bridges. They were not our roads, but the locals were being told it's going to take 6 months to get those bridges back in working order, and so you just have to find a way to evacuate. And those islands would have died if that would have happened. So they came to me and said, Governor, can you help us? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to help. So I got my team together and I said, listen, I don't want any red tape. I don't want any bureaucracy. I don't want any of this stuff. I just want this stuff built. So let's start now and get it done. And so we took over the job for Pine Island, and they feared that they were going to be out for 6 months, and we rebuilt the bridge in 3 days. And so I just raised that because I am willing to send my Florida people down to the southern border to build the wall. Put us in, Coach. Come on, Joe. We'll do it. We'll get it done.
Thanks to the Southwest Florida Public Safety Academy here at Fort Myers Technical College for hosting us. Really excited to be here, excited to be able to sign some legislation. But before we get into that, I will just say, Florida is looking at what is going on at the southern border and the rolling disaster and impending even greater disaster with the expiration of Title II. And so late last night, Florida was able to win an injunction, and I want to thank Attorney General Ashley Moody for filing that, to say that Biden cannot just release all these people into our country who are here illegally. And that is putting some sand in the gears for them, and maybe it will cause them to look internally and say, maybe we should start doing our job and actually protecting the American people for a change, because they have not been willing to do that. And in fact, you now see more people than ever are prepared to storm across. And so from really the beginning of this administration, anytime Florida could do something to make an impact, we have done it. We did beat them on catch and release. We're able to go back to that court and get the injunction yesterday. So maybe that will prompt some introspection in the Biden administration. I doubt it very seriously. But what they're doing is a total disgrace. So thanks for Florida for stepping up. Thanks to AG Moody. We're really excited to see the American people fight back for a change, and that's what we do here.
Now, I wish the elites in Washington, D.C. would take a page out of the Iowa playbook, but instead they have ignored what works, and they've continued to plunge this nation into the abyss. Our country is going in the wrong direction. We can see it, and we can feel it. Our southern border has collapsed. The Mexican drug cartels have more control over what goes on at the border than our own United States government. Millions of illegal aliens have poured into this country, including criminal aliens and even individuals on the terrorist watch list. The massive amounts of fentanyl that the cartels are bringing in has killed tens of thousands of our fellow Americans. Look at the economy. The Biden administration is doing all it can to make it harder for the average family to make ends meet and to attain and maintain a middle-class lifestyle. The bill for the massive borrowing, spending, and debt and record printing of money by the Fed, that's falling on the American people. Our dollar has lost almost 20% of its value in the last 4 years. Look at energy. You would think that with these economic problems with inflation, you may want to tap into more domestic energy, but no, Biden is deliberately trying to kneecap our energy production, and he's trying to force Americans into electric vehicles, which will make us more reliant on China, who provides most of the materials for the batteries. We have a bureaucracy that our founding fathers would find unrecognizable. It is an unaccountable, weaponized administrative state that unevenly wields authority depending on its targets. 2 different sets of rules depending on whether you're a member in good standing of elite society or not. If Hunter were a Republican, he would have been in jail years ago. American cities have been hollowed out by spiking crime due to weak, ideologically driven policies that intentionally allow criminals to roam the streets. We've also witnessed the steady advance of a new form of leftism that has infected institutions across our nation. This form of cultural Marxism sows divisions in our society and devalues merit and achievement. This woke ideology represents a war on truth itself.
It's really exciting to be here because I'm proud to be able to stand here and let you know that our great American comeback will begin when we send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware. Spends a lot of time as president on vacation. We might as well make it permanent and let him stay. I am excited to be in Iowa because I think that if you look at what we've done in Florida, we've seen a lot of the same bold policies instituted here in Iowa. And that's a testament to the legislators who've worked hard over these recent years, and it's a testament to your governor, Governor Reynolds, who has led. People would sometimes ask me, why aren't other states doing what Florida's doing? We're so excited. I said, Iowa's doing what Florida's doing. And so people started to really catch on. I get attention just because the media is always attacking me. So people are always talking about Florida. But the reality is Iowa's really set a great standard. People had said that all the success in Iowa with these great conservative policies makes Iowa the Florida of the North. Well, I don't know. I've been looking at it. It's pretty impressive. Maybe we're the Iowa of the South, but these elites in D.C. could learn a thing or two about what Iowa's done and the common sense and the conservative values, but instead, Biden and his crew are intent to plunge this country into the abyss. We are going in the wrong direction as a country now. Are you happy with having an open border where millions of illegals are pouring in? Are you happy having an economy where inflation has reduced our standard of living? Are you happy that Biden is trying to stop us from being energy independent and not even producing our own? Are you upset that we have a bureaucracy that is totally out of control? I mean, just think about how this has been weaponized. They will go after people who don't think like them. If Hunter were a Republican, he would have been in jail a long time ago, and we all know that. Are you happy with seeing cities across this country overwhelmed with crime? No. Are you happy to see institution after institution be infected with the woke mind virus? Are you happy that the federal government used its authority to try to impose a biomedical security state on this country with mandates and lockdowns? And if it wasn't for states like Florida and Iowa, they would have gotten away with it, but we had the gall to say no, not on our watch. And are we all, especially on the heels of Memorial Day, are we all revolted by how we lost 13 service members in Afghanistan due to the ineptitude of Joe Biden as commander-in-chief? Yes. So we have a situation where the political elite in this country are detached from the wishes of everyday hardworking Americans. Listen to this stat. 5 of the 7 wealthiest counties in the United States of America
are suburbs of Washington, D.C. I can tell you they're not producing very much in Washington, D.C. besides mountains of debt and loads of hot air. So why they are wealthy in that part of the country is because our political system rewards people who are connected to the ruling class, and they reward them at the expense of people who are out in the country doing it the right way. They want to impose their agenda on us. They are not trying to create an agenda that represents us or represents our values. And all this means is that our country is now in a state of decline. The good news is I think American decline is not inevitable. I think it is a choice. It is a choice that we will make as a people, particularly in this upcoming election. I think we have a chance to choose a better path. And if we choose a better path, we can have a revival of the greatness of America. We can revitalize this country, and we have a responsibility to do it.
Right. In terms of the China, I mean, just think about how humiliating this is for the country. They flew a spy balloon clear across the continental United States with basically no pushback. Our people knew this balloon was coming, and yeah, they finally shot it after it had already gotten all the data that it needed and was already, off the East Coast. And it's like, okay, is that a strong country to just allow that to happen? And then now the fact that China is potentially setting up eavesdropping military outposts in Cuba, 90 miles from southern Florida Keys, that is a slap in the face to this country. They do not fear Biden. They realize he's weak, and so they're taking advantage of the weakness. And I think what the CCP understands is they understand the language of strength. They understand if a leader is saying what they mean and meaning what they say and is willing to back it up, they're not going to mess with that. But if they have an opportunity to take some action and to advance their agenda in ways that they don't envision any pushback for, they're going to take that. So I think his whole approach to China has been flawed. They're now really bending over backwards, it seems, to try to get back in Xi's good graces. Meanwhile, China continues to increase their military. They continue to have an inordinate impact on our lives here in America with how much our economy is now dependent on things made in China. You can't even get the ammunition we would need for a war unless you get stuff from China. You can't even refurbish our own nuclear arsenal unless you get stuff from China. And then what does Biden want to do? He wants to force everyone an electric vehicle. Well, guess what? Where do we get the materials to go into creating the batteries? From China. So it actually makes us more dependent on China. So I think there's a few things that we need to be doing. One, and we've taken action in Florida, combat CCP influence within our own country. We nixed the Confucius Institutes in the state of Florida. They put them in universities, colleges, and they're basically propaganda arms of the CCP. We said, not here. We signed legislation banning the purchase of land by CCP in Florida and related entities. They want farmland. They want land near military bases. Not here, not on our watch. But they have influence in higher education. They have influence throughout our domestic economy. They have influence in things like entertainment, which, the Soviet Union, they would have spies and stuff. They never, at the height of the Cold War, had this much influence over American society. So that's just one thing. The second thing is we need to be economically sovereign as a country. It's one thing to say, you deal with other countries, and of course we will have to do that. But to have so much critical issues in our country depend on China is not healthy. I don't think it's healthy for our industrial base, for our economy, for jobs, for all that. But certainly from a security perspective, it's a huge, huge problem. So we need to be doing more of that here in the United States. And then just finally, we have a limited capacity now to project power around the world. We had about 600 ships in Reagan's day. We got, about 280, 285 now. If you look at the Pacific theater, I think that is the dominant theater for us in this decade and beyond. And, we need to be able to project power. We need to be able to work with Japan, Korea, India, Australia, other allies in the region to be able to check Chinese expansionism and China's ambitions. And it all goes back to a bet that a lot of policymakers made in this country 20, 25 years ago, that if you put China on a pedestal, gave them most favored nation status, put them in the World Trade Organization, that they would become more democratic as they were able to, dump products into other people's markets. And in reality, the opposite has happened. Xi is more ideological than any ruler since Mao Zedong, and he's been more authoritarian than any Chinese ruler since Mao Zedong, and he's used a lot of that industrial strength, a lot of that wealth to make China a near-peer competitor to the United States. And so that was a failed experiment, and now we're in a situation where we've got to dig ourselves out of that and get on better footing so that we're doing what we need to do to protect the interests of the American people. Yes?
Trump has continued to attack you, and he did again last.
Iowa! Are you ready to send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware on a permanent vacation? I can promise you this, in my White House, there will be no cocaine allowed in the White House. And look, my son's only 5 years old, so he's not going to be lining his pockets with money from foreign governments, so don't worry about that. It's great to be here. I want to thank Chairman Kaufman. I want to thank all the great legislators in the state of Iowa for their great work, and I want to commend your outstanding governor, Kim Reynolds, for her leadership leading this great state. Our country is in decline, and Joe Biden is the custodian of that decline. I'm running for president because we as Republicans cannot be content with simply managing the decline of our country a little bit better than the Democrats. We must reverse American decline. We must restore this country to greatness, and we must provide our country with a new birth of freedom. To do that requires vision, it requires courage, and it requires leadership. That's exactly what we did in the state of Florida. Everything I promised people I would do, we did, and we delivered more than what we promised. We expanded Second Amendment rights. We enacted the heartbeat bill. We cut taxes by $2.7 billion. We have paid down 25% of our state's debt. We have the #1 rated economy in the country, #1 in new business formations. We have eliminated critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. We have enacted a Parents' Bill of Rights to protect the rights of parents, and we have held criminals accountable by enacting the death penalty for pedophiles, and our crime rate is at a 50-year low. And when it came time to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, we refused to let the state of Florida descend into some type of Faucian dystopia. We stood strong against the mob, against the left, against the bureaucracy, and we fought for our people's rights. We fought for their jobs. We fought to have our kids in school, and as a result, the state of Florida has never done better. We will deliver those results in Washington. We will repeal Bidenomics so that middle-class people actually have a chance to get ahead in this country again. We will stop the Congress from borrowing and spending this country into oblivion. We need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. We need term limits for members of Congress so that we can have a citizen legislature again. We will get the bureaucracy off the back of small businesses in this country, and I'm going to issue an order to all agencies in D.C. to reduce their D.C. footprint by at least 50%. We reject policies like the Green New Deal. We will develop our own natural resources, and we will be energy independent because we don't want to help our enemies. I pledge to be the president to finally solve the issue of the southern border. We're sending the military to the border. Yes, we will build a border wall, and we will use deadly force against the Mexican drug cartels because I'm sick of them poisoning our kids, I'm sick of them killing our citizens, and I'm sick of them trafficking people into this country. That ends on January 20th, 2025.
We will usher in a reckoning for those like Dr. Fauci who perpetrated COVID-19 lockdown and mandate policies. Those policies were destructive for this country. They hurt people, they hurt our economy, and we still haven't fully recovered from it. You don't coddle bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci. You bring them in and you say you are fired, and we are going to hold them accountable for what they did. We are going to ensure that parents in this country have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and well-being of their kids. Schools and systems are important, but they do not supersede the rights of parents. We want education in this country, not indoctrination in this country. We got it done in Florida, and we need to get it done nationally. And I got Kamala Harris coming down to Florida trying to create phony narratives because she understands Florida has stood up to the left's agenda. We have beat the left's agenda in the state of Florida, and so she thinks she can come down and lie about what we're doing in the state of Florida. I'm not budging an inch. We are going to fight back against these people, and we are not letting them take over our schools any longer. We are going to get this right as a nation. We will also end the weaponization of federal agencies like the FBI and the Department of Justice. On day one, with me as president, you will have a new director of the FBI, long overdue. You will see a house cleaning at the Department of Justice, and we are personally going to hold them accountable. We are not going to allow them to target people like parents going to a school board meeting, pro-life demonstrators just speaking their mind, or targeting religious groups like observant Catholics. Weaponization ends on day one of our administration, and we are going to reconstitutionalize this federal government once and for all. I'm proud to be the only candidate running for president on either side of the aisle this year that's actually served in a war. I served in Iraq as a naval officer alongside Navy SEALs in Fallujah and Ramadi and places like that. Not exactly Club Med, but it was duty that called. And, I had opportunities to do a lot of other things in my life. I was a blue-collar kid. I worked minimum wage jobs, didn't necessarily have anything handed to me, but I put myself in a position to do well. But then 9/11 happened. All volunteer force. I said I need to do my part. So we served. And when you wear the cloth of your country, you wear that American flag on your uniform, you serve beside fellow patriots, and you serve a mission greater than yourself. That's a noble calling. And I thank all the veterans in Iowa and throughout this country who have worn the uniform, because at the end of the day, a veteran is somebody who at one point in their life has written a check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including that individual's life. And we have a situation now in this country where our recruiting into our military is at the lowest level since the end of the draft during the Vietnam War. And the reason why, and I have veterans coming up to me saying, Governor, I don't know that I'd want my kids or grandkids to join today's military. Why? Because they're indulging in social experimentation. They're pursuing political agendas, woke ideology. They've taken their eye off the ball. As Commander-in-Chief on day one, we are going to rip the politics out of the military. We're going to end the woke agenda, and we are going to restore the military to mission first. And we are going to make people proud to serve again and join again, and that's going to make our country stronger. So here's the thing. We're not getting a mulligan on 2024. We either win this election and make good on all the promises that we're making, or the Democrats are going to throw this country into a hole that's going to take us a generation to come out of. I believe that decline is a choice. I believe success is attainable, and I know that freedom is worth fighting for. This is our chance in 2024 to send the Biden-Harris administration to the dustbin of history where it belongs. We have to rise to the occasion. We have to fight the good fight. We have to finish the race, and we have to keep the faith. The time for excuses is over. We must get the job done. I will get the job done. God bless you all. Thank you so much. We're doing all 99 counties in Iowa because this caucus demands that you earn it, and you got to go meet the folks. So you'll see me everywhere. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Let's win in 2024. Eighth, we need to rein in the Federal Reserve. It is not designed or supposed to be an economic central planner. It is not supposed to be indulging in social justice or social engineering. It's got one job: maintain stable prices. And it has departed from that with what it's done over the last many years. We're now in a situation where they've raised interest rates because they put us in this. And so now affording a home, your mortgage payment is like twice as much as what it would have been 4 or 5 years ago for basically the same home, given how much interest rates have gone up. So the Fed needs to have a limited role in this country. It's not accountable to the electorate. So the idea that it's going to take all this power and that we're all just going to be its guinea pigs, that doesn't work in a republic or a constitutional system. So I will appoint a chairman of the Federal Reserve who understands that, who understands the limited role that it has, and is going to focus on making sure the prices are stable for American businesses and consumers. We also will reject the Federal Reserve's attempt to impose a central bank digital currency on the American people. Now, what the Fed has said is, well, we're going to consult with the legislature, we'll consult with the executive, and ideally, we would get authorization from Congress. I think is what they said. No, it's not ideal. You cannot do this unless Congress authorizes it. I don't think Congress would authorize it. I would certainly veto that if I were president. But why do they want this? They want to go to a cashless society. They want to eliminate cryptocurrency, and they want all the transactions to go through this central bank digital currency. Now, why do they want to do that? Well, China wants to do it because they impose a social credit system on that. People at the World Economic Forum in Davos, some of these elites, they've said, yeah, if you have central bank digital currency, it allows elites to circumscribe purchases that they don't like ammunition, like energy, like all these different things. And so sometimes you have things that are proposed by policymakers that are kind of like a wolf's in sheep's clothing, that it may look okay on the surface, but underneath it you can see that it's a threat to liberty. Central bank digital currency is not that. Central bank digital currency is a wolf coming as a wolf. If you think that you can trust unaccountable elites to centrally plan our economy and have oversight over your economic decisions, and that's not going to end up being abused, then I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona I would like to sell you. So we see that this is a threat. In Florida, we've seen them talking about it, so I actually signed legislation where we don't recognize central bank digital currency. Now, Congress could override us on that, but the Fed unilaterally, I don't think they could override us on that, so we've protected Floridians. But as president, on day one, CBDC goes into the trash can. We're not going to allow it. And we are going to let Americans invest in things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. No one's forcing you to do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. Biden's war on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency will come to an end when I become president. Yes.
I'm going to turn it back a little smaller. Daycares are a huge part of the economy. If families can't work because they don't have daycare, let alone affordable, daycare shortage is huge, not only in Iowa, but also across the country. Got a plan for supporting, helping, encouraging.
What's your name?
My name's Ashley.
Okay. And thanks for the question, Ashley. First of all, I don't think it's a small thing. I mean, I think it's a big thing. Raising our kids and being able to make ends meet as families, that's a big thing. That's a huge issue. And I think what we've seen with the Bidenomics is it's almost impossible for a family to get by on a sole source of income. And, I believe people should have the right to make the decisions of how they do their families. But if somebody wants to stay home with the kids and it's not economically feasible, then they get put into a situation where they're searching for childcare and they're searching for all this. I don't know that the federal government is going to be able to solve that, because I think that to impose bureaucracy, certainly mandates would not. There may be things you can do with the tax code to make things work a little bit better. Part of it is when COVID hit, a lot of people dropped out of the labor force. Now in Florida, our labor force is more than it was then because we had the economy open, but a lot of these other places, people dropped out. So you do see places where you need more personnel in some of these, and in Florida, we've had to work to do more as well. So I think there would be more of a supporting role, but I definitely think it's a big, big issue, and I think it's one that's going to continue to be going forward.
We have time for one more question.
So I don't think I need to tell you that we've got a country that's in decline. But I do have to tell you that decline's not inevitable. That decline is a choice. It's a choice that we are going to make as Americans over these next 18 months. Are we going to continue to do what's put us in this mess, or are we going to reverse course and reverse the decline and restore this country to the greatness that it deserves? And in order to get there, we have to send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware where he belongs. If you look at what's going on in this country, we have a situation where families that are working hard, playing by the rules, doing everything right, simply raising their family is becoming cost prohibitive. Forget about affording a new house, forget about affording a new car, and grocery bills have doubled in the last few years. Meanwhile, people in Washington, D.C. have never done better. Right now, 5 of the 8 wealthiest counties in our entire country are suburbs of Washington, D.C. Are they producing much of anything beneficial? I know they're producing a lot of debt. I know they're producing a lot of hot air, but the policies that make it more difficult for American families are benefiting the people who are politically connected. And Bidenomics is basically, you have a lower standard of living so he can pursue the left's ideological agenda. And when I become president, we are going to reverse Bidenomics. We are going to take all the executive orders, all the bureaucracy and regulation he's put on, and we're going to throw it into the trash can on day one. It's going to be gone. This problem that we have with the affordability and the groceries and everything, that was created by government policy. It was created starting with the COVID lockdowns when they stopped the economy. Then they pumped trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in borrowed and printed money into the economy. They paid people not to work. They did a lot of other things. Look, if you could just run your household where you could just keep putting stuff on the credit card and there was never anybody that had to pay the bill, yeah, that would be nice, right? But we know that's not how the world works. So who is paying the bill are Americans. So this Congress and the Federal Reserve and everybody up there, the lot of them, they have created the problems that we're dealing with. And so as president, I am not going to let the Congress spend us into oblivion any longer. We're going to fight back against the big spenders. If they put a bill on my desk that is plunging your kids and grandkids into further debt and further economic difficulty, I'll veto it and send it back to them. That's what I've done in the state of Florida. You know, in Florida, I've vetoed billions of dollars in wasteful spending. We've run budget surpluses every year. Since I've been governor in 2019, we've actually paid down almost 25% of our state's total debt that we've accumulated throughout the entire history of the state of Florida. So don't tell me that it can't be done. You just got to be willing to lead, and you've got to be willing to make good decisions. But this song that's come out that we were asked about in the debate really talks about how the people that are in power benefit from policies that hurt the rest of Americans. And so you do have these rich men north of Richmond who have done very well plunging this country into debt. That's going to stop on January 20th, 2025 when I take office. We also have... Okay, with that, any questions?
Do you trust the federal government to help seeing what happened in Hawaii just a few weeks ago in East Palestine a few months ago?
So the question is what about the federal government in light of what happened in Maui? Look, I think the Maui is a total catastrophe, what happened there. And I don't think we have all the answers to that. I think we should have all the answers to that. It's interesting how incurious our corporate media is about what happened in Maui. I mean, I don't see them interviewing parents who can't find their kids, but we know there's a lot of people missing. So that was a total disaster, really, really heartbreaking to hear some of the stories, even though they're not being publicized. I think this situation is much different. I think that the state of Florida, we prepare for this stuff. We were prepared. We responded. And really what the federal government's role is just turning on programs that Congress has enacted over many, many years. And so it's basically serving as a checkbook to get people reimbursed for debris cleanup, to give people individual assistance. And so in that sense, I think that has been turned on. I anticipate that will go smoothly, but most of the nuts and bolts is done by our local communities and by the state of Florida, and that's really how it should be. Disaster response is really bottom up. It's bottom up. The people in the communities know when you're in Cedar Key and they're talking about evacuating in light of the storm. That's not the federal government doing it. It's not even the state government telling them. That's the local government saying, if you're in this zone, you're going to be susceptible to storm surge. It's time to evacuate. Now, people can make their decisions based on that or not, but I think that people who were in really significant harm's way of storm surge, by and large, heeded those warnings, and that's why we still have not had one single coastal fatality reported. There was one traffic fatality in Alachua County involving the storm that has been confirmed, but none on these other areas. And this was some major, major storm surge. And so you had that, you had the state managing and assisting, and that's really the bread and butter. The checkbook from the feds is great, and we're going to, whatever resources are available as the governor, I'm going to pull those levers to be able to help Floridians. But we're certainly not relying on the federal government to do the day-to-day heavy lifting. We're going to do that as Floridians, as people in the counties and municipalities, and of course at the state level.
Joe Biden and corporate media have been blaming climate change for the natural disasters and the hurricanes. What do you think about that?
Well, I think if you look, there was a storm that went on this almost exact track in 1896, and it had 125 mile an hour winds, just like this one. If you look at the state of Florida, the most powerful hurricane we've ever had is actually, the anniversary is now. It's the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. It had 185 mile an hour sustained winds, the most powerful hurricane that's ever been made landfall in the state of Florida, probably in the United States, but certainly in the state of Florida. That ripped up parts of the Florida Keys. It killed hundreds of people. There were people that got caught up in the storm. Their clothes got ripped off their bodies. The wind was so strong. So I think that the notion that somehow hurricanes are something new, that's just false. And we've got to stop politicizing the weather and stop politicizing natural disasters. We know from history there have been times where it's been very busy in Florida, late 40s, early 50s. You had a lot of hits of significant hurricanes. So I think sometimes people need to take a breath and get a little bit of perspective here. But the notion that somehow if we just adopt, very left-wing policies at the federal level, that somehow we will not have hurricanes, that is a lie. And that is people trying to take what's happened with different types of storms and use that as a pretext to advance their agenda on the backs of people that are suffering. And that's wrong, and we're not going to do that in the state of Florida. Thank you.
You also have a right as a parent to know what is being taught in your child's school. And in Florida, we've ensured parents have those tools. Why they are trying to jam some of this into these grades, particularly the younger grades, but they are doing it. They're trying to jam adult material and pornography. There's books like this Gender Queer, which is totally unacceptable to have. Now, the media, so we've given parents the right to go in and say, no, that's not consistent with Florida standards. That should not be in my fourth grader's library. And so it gets removed. No one even defends this stuff. Once you call them on it, they don't defend it because they know it's something that's indefensible. But what the left and the media will say is if you remove a pornographic book out of a fourth grade classroom, that is a book ban. You're banning books. I can tell you in Florida, you can buy whatever book you want as an adult. If you want to be doing this type of adult material, don't jam it in an elementary school classroom. Do it on your own time. Go watch Hunter Biden's laptop for all I care. I don't know what you do. Just keep it away from our kids, please. So it's a hoax for them to say it, but I called them on it. We did a press conference in Florida a few months ago. We said we're going to expose the book ban hoax. Before I even spoke, we just played on a TV screen what the parents had actually objected to. The news stations that were covering our press conference cut their feed because they said it was too graphic to air on television. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a 6?
So when I approach issues, I obviously have, faith that guides me, political philosophy that guides me, but what it guides me more now than 10 years ago before we had kids is the fact that I'm a dad of a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old. And I see what's happening around this country where there's really an all-out assault on parents' rights, all-out assault on the family, and I know we cannot be successful as a country if we don't recognize the fundamental right that parents have to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. You recognize it in Iowa, we've protected it in Florida, but some of these other states are doing the opposite. In California now, they passed legislation that says, as a parent, if you have a kid, say you have a 10-year-old son, and your son comes to you and says that he thinks he's really a girl, if you don't indulge that, you could lose custody of your kids. So this is what is going on, and you see it in the schools where they're trying to do indoctrination. That is not the purpose of our school system. We want education. We don't want indoctrination in the schools. Florida, we put our money where our mouth is. We not only have a Parents' Bill of Rights, we eliminated critical race theory in our K-12 schools. We're not teaching kids to hate this country or to hate each other. We also excluded and prohibited the imposition of transgender ideology in our school system. It is wrong to tell a first-grade student that they may have been born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. Parents do not want that. It's inappropriate. First of all, it's not true, and it's not something that has a place in the school. Yet you see that happening across the country. In Florida, we said it's not going to happen in Florida, so we did a bill called the Parents' Rights in Education, and the parents in Florida, regardless of political, they were really supportive of it. I mean, we want to focus on the basics, and I want my kids to focus on the basics. I don't want them being told that they can change their gender. It's just fundamentally wrong. The media didn't like when we did it. The left didn't like when we did it. There's also a company that you may have heard of based in part of Central Florida named Disney that didn't like what we were doing. But throughout most of Florida's recent history, or all of Florida's recent history, Disney basically called the shots. I mean, they're the most powerful company in the state. If they wanted something done, it usually got done. If they wanted something stopped, it usually got stopped. And too many Republicans in our party throughout many, many decades have always bent the knee to big corporations and sometimes don't do what's right. Well, that's not me. So when they were coming after me, I said, you know what? I took an oath to support and defend our state's constitution and the people of Florida. I did not agree to subcontract out my leadership to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. So we're doing what's right. And we're going to stand for what's right. We also understood that so we have 6, 5, and 3. My oldest is a 6-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, 3-year-old daughter. And, they all like different activities. They're all very good in sports. And my girl should have the same opportunity to compete with fairness and integrity that my son does.
And that's why we enacted protections for women's athletics in the state of Florida. We're not allowing them to jam males into female sports. You have a right to compete on a level playing field. We also protected the girls' bathrooms and the locker rooms. You know, I was at the Faith event yesterday in D.C. I had a swimmer come up to me. She actually competed against the Penn swimmer, the tall, you know, had been on the men's team for 3 years and then switches to the women's team and wins the national women's championship. What a fraud! Give me a break. But she said that, you know, that swimmer was in their locker room with them, and it was uncomfortable. So she had to go in like a utility closet to change because she wanted to be, you know, and I totally understand that. So in Florida, we protected those safe spaces. I think that that's a no-brainer to have to do. And it's sad that we have to do this, but we did. You know, we have prohibited this gruesome practice of doing puberty blockers and sex change operations on minors. It is wrong. It is mutilation, and it has no place in a free and just society. And in Florida, now, part of the reason we're even, I mean, sometimes I think to myself, if we were here just 10 years ago, and I told you some of the stuff that was happening, you probably wouldn't believe that this was going to happen. So things have really gone off the rails very quickly. Why is that? I think it's because a lot of this is about ideology. It's about woke mind virus and the woke agenda trying to take over every institution in our society. And some people say, oh, you should be talking about it. We don't even know, you know, people don't even know what it means, all this stuff. Listen, at the end of the day, woke represents a war on truth. And we have to have a society that's rooted in truth. Do not tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to accept that because it's not true, and I won't accept it. And we can't be successful as a society if we're accepting things that are not true. The truth will set us free. But it's also the case that when this ideology takes over parts of our society, it has a huge, huge negative impact on the American people. I mean, just think about things like ESG, this idea that businesses should pursue environment, social governance. All it is, that's just a facade to justify major corporations departing from their core business mission to try to pursue a left-wing agenda. Maybe that's against firearms, maybe that's against energy production, you name it, but they're trying to change our society, and they're doing it in a way that's going to make our country poor and less free as a result. When it overtakes education, you get indoctrination in the schools, and our kids end up dumber as a result. When it overtakes criminal justice, why do you have all these cities decaying? San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia. It's because they're not holding criminals accountable. And that's all driven by ideology. So people are less safe, these communities get hollowed out, and a lot of them move to Florida, and they tell me the stories about how bad it was there. So in Florida, we've recognized that we can't just sit back and allow this to run roughshod over our society. We've made our state the place where woke goes to die. And we have beat the woke in the state of Florida more than anybody else has done in any other part of the country. And as president, we must together work to leave woke ideology in the dustbin of history where it belongs once and for all.
And then finally, we'll be able to say that together we restored the original understanding of our Constitution. We will have a limited government that works alongside us. We will not have an unaccountable bureaucracy that's been weaponized against us. I look at these agencies like the Department of Justice, like the FBI, like the IRS. You know, we have a government. They can't tell you how many tanks they left in Afghanistan. They can't tell you where the money they've sent to Ukraine has gone. They can't tell you how many people are coming across our border illegally. They can't even tell you how cocaine got into the White House. But yet, if you make a $601 transaction, the IRS is going to be on your case and they are going to be policing you. That is unacceptable. We will have restored this government to its rightful owners, we, the American people. And we have no choice but to make sure we get all this done. My wife and I, and my wife is here, the First Lady of Florida. Many of you got to meet her. She is, I'm a little biased, but I do think this is true of all 50 states. She's America's greatest First Lady, and we appreciate everything that she does. So we have at home, we have a 6, 5, and 3-year-olds, and so first grade, kindergarten, and pre-K 3. So we're very sensitive about what's going to happen in this next generation, because it's going to impact them, it's going to impact some of your kids, your grandkids, and we run the risk on our current course of being the first generation of Americans that are leaving to our children and grandchildren an America that's less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And that would not be doing justice to our kids and grandkids. We will not have been doing our part as Americans, and I'm motivated to get in the fight because of that reality. But I'm also motivated because I have an appreciation for the people that have come before us. When I used to fly up to Washington, D.C., there was a particular route that the plane could take going into Reagan National Airport, and it would take you flush parallel to the National Mall. So if you looked out the left side of the plane, you saw sweeping up-close views of the Lincoln Memorial, the Reflecting Pool, Washington Monument, all the other monuments, and then perched on top of the hill in the not-too-distant yonder, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building. And you think to yourself, you know, all that stuff really symbolizes the principles and the ideals that make our country unique, and it fills you with a sense of pride of being an American. And I can tell you a lot of the tourists would really get excited about it, and so it made you feel good. But what I noticed after doing that a few times was looking out the left side of the plane. While those monuments were spectacular, while those monuments were nice to see, those were not the greatest monuments to our country. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, you saw a lot of small, nondescript monuments orderly arranged over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me then, and I believe now, you can have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require each generation of Americans, when tested, to step up and to defend freedom. And yes, in certain instances, to put on a uniform, to risk your life and indeed give that last full measure of devotion in service to the greater cause. We are not doing justice to their sacrifices and their memories if we allow this country to continue its descent. We have a responsibility to step up, we have a responsibility to fight back, and we have a responsibility to reverse this country's decline and give this country a new birth of freedom. So now's the time to do it. The time for excuses is over. We are not going to get a mulligan on the 2024 election. I don't want to be in a situation where it's recriminations and the Democrats get in again and they end up doing even greater damage. Just think about the damage they have done when they had 50 senators in 2021, barely had a majority in the House, and they were able to do all this damage. Yet when we have majorities, Republicans don't do squat with the majorities. How do we keep letting this happen? So we all got to do our part. And here's the thing. The way our society functions now, when you stand up for what's right, when you're exercising leadership, you could be a governor, you could be a presidential candidate, you could be running for city council, you could just be a concerned citizen, you could be a mom going to a school board meeting. If you're standing up for what's right and you're exercising leadership, that is not cost-free. People will come after you. The left will come after you. The media will come after you. I'm actually a little disappointed. I didn't see any protesters out for me today. Where did the protesters go? We had them 6 months ago when I was here. I had them in other parts of California since I've been here, but they will come after you. And so the question is, you know, it's always easier to just kind of retreat back in your little safety comfort zone, to not want to get out there, to not have to put up with it, because it can be nasty. It can be tough. But, you know, if people were willing to put on a uniform and give their life for us in years past, that is the least we can do, to step up and fight back when freedom is under attack. So let's resolve. let's resolve to take the next year, year and a half, to ensure that in every corner of this country, we are bringing a message of hope, we are bringing a message of renewal, and we are bringing a message of freedom to every citizen in every jurisdiction in this land. And I don't care if it's someplace that is dark red, like we've made most of Florida, or if it's in the heart of San Francisco. We have got to carry the message, and we've got to do what's right. So I can just tell you this, I'm not backing down. We've got a country to save. Let's get the job done. God bless you all, and thank you so much. We appreciate you. Yes, thank you.
The questions about the border, why are people in Washington just have no interest? Because they don't care about you. That's why. They don't care about what is happening to this country. They are in power, and they are perfectly willing to let this country disintegrate because it doesn't affect them. Think about it. If you're the President of the United States and you have a massive invasion across your southern border, put aside for a minute the drugs, the lawlessness, the criminal, just from a perspective of maintaining your country's territorial integrity. It's humiliating that this is happening to our country. It is absolutely humiliating, and so I can tell you for me, it will be a day one issue. We're going to declare it a national emergency on day one. We're going to send the military to the southern border. We're going to stop. We're going to have remain in Mexico. We're going to stop all these insane policies that are enticing people to come. Yes, we will do the fee on the remittances, get billions of dollars, and we will build the wall with the payments that we get from those. But the most important thing we'll do that will change the trajectory of this and will ensure our territorial integrity is to lean in with lethal force against the Mexican drug cartels. That's what we've got to do. So, all right, one more. I don't know about you, but I'm more than ready to send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware where he belongs. We were in California last week for this debate at Ronald Reagan's Presidential Library, and, you know, I tend not to spend a lot of time out there. I'm not always well received in certain parts of California, but that's okay. It brought back memories because the first event we did was in the VFW in Coronado, California. And that happened to be, I got orders there when I was on active duty in the Navy to be at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, assigned to Naval Special Warfare Group 1, and then we deployed to Iraq out of Coronado in 2007. I'll never forget, after doing that deployment, some of you have served, I'd imagine. Who has served our country? Thank you for your service. Some of you guys are a little bit too old to have done the second Iraq War. But Fallujah, Ramadi, Iraq, not the best places in the world. So you're there, but I'll never forget landing at Naval Air Station Coronado after that deployment. And look, I'm from Florida. Y'all are here in South Carolina. They're great states. We have something called humidity that they don't necessarily have in Coronado. And so you get off, and after being in that sandbox, to have just pure, fresh Pacific Ocean air just hit you, it was a great feeling. And you know what? It kind of was like, thank God I'm an American. Thank God I'm back in the United States. And it made me appreciate, why I had served, what people have done before us to give us a free society. And I was very proud to have done that. And I got to tell you, thinking back on that, that was 15 years ago. And to now, look what's happened to our country. You know, it's sad. And what's happened to our country, there's been a lot of things that have happened, but you have elites in D.C. who do not care about you. That is the underlying problem. They borrow, they print, they spend money, and you pay for it in the form of higher prices at the grocery store, higher gas costs. Forget about affording a new home with interest rates are 8% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. So they have gotten away with doing this, and you are left to pay. An open border. It doesn't bother them. It bothers people in communities throughout this country, although you even have the governor of New York now saying you got to close the border. That's progress. You know, they got mad at me in Florida when Florida shipped 50 illegals to Martha's Vineyard. They got mad about that. But it shows you. But you have tens of thousands of people dying every year because of fentanyl overdose. You have the drug cartels running our border, and yet they don't lift a finger to do anything about it. You look at our military, the weakness in the military compared to where we used to be. Our recruiting is at a post-Vietnam low. You have a lot of social experimentation going on in the military. China looks at that. They see pronouns and this and that. They laugh in our face when you see that. You see cities throughout this country where criminals are not prosecuted. You can get mugged in Los Angeles and they will not prosecute. People break into your house in San Francisco. Just let them back on the street. How is that acceptable in the United States of America? Thank you.
So what we've seen in Israel seems like it's even worse than we imagined. I said yesterday it was Israel's 9/11. If you look at the death toll and the brutality, it's probably given their population several orders above that in terms of the deaths and massive casualties, and they are responding. And we need to be unified in support of their ability to respond and to defend their people against really, truly barbaric attacks. And the images are revolting to see what Hamas has done to take women and children. It's the worst of humanity. We been supportive, of course, of Israel for a long time. They're a special ally, great ally for us. And we all need to be standing with them in this really, really dark moment.
Governor, right now, they're pretty much paralyzed on how the leaders and legislating aid to Israel right now. What's your message to them?
Well, one, I don't know that Israel has requested anything yet, so we'll see if there is. Clearly, Israel, one thing that I've always appreciated about them is even though the U.S. has a good relationship, even though we've provided support over the years, that is not displacing their responsibility. They take it very seriously. So I think they're going to have the firepower they need for this response. But look, in Washington, it's just there's a lot of theater, there's a lot of chaos. That's been happening for many, many years. That's not the way you govern in Florida. You don't see that. We don't have the drama. We don't have the palace intrigue. We just have execution. We have, when there's times where we've needed to have special sessions of the legislature, we bring them in, we get the job done, and then we move on. That's really, I think, the way people want to see. But there's just an overall lack of leadership. Yes, there's a lack of leadership in the Congress, of course, but there's a lack of leadership at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There's not a sense of urgency from Joe Biden about this. He couldn't even be bothered. They even wake him up to tell him that one of our closest allies in the entire world was under attack. This is a major event in world history, and yet he just slept in. So we need leadership very badly in this country.
Governor, there are reports of U.S. hostages in Hamas and also casualties in Egypt. These are developing reports, but have you seen those? Any reaction to that?
So I haven't seen anything confirmed, but clearly anybody that knows Israel knows that there are a lot of Americans that live there, that study there. We have a very close relationship between our peoples. So that's been a concern of mine. If you go to some of those communities that were attacked, there are a lot of Israeli Americans that live in some of those cities. So the State Department, the administration, they need to identify if there are any Americans that have been harmed, if there are any Americans who are being held hostage. That's something that's very, very important. And of course, we owe a responsibility to be able to defend our people. All right, I'll see you guys at the next stop. Thank you.
All right, sir.
Any more?
All right,
thanks, guys.
Let's get loaded up.
Up here in the northern part of New Hampshire, we're watching what's going around with Israel, and a lot of people are like, what can we do?
And there's a lot of people. Florida, we have the second highest Israeli-American population in America. We have a lot of Jewish population. It's actually surged since I've been governor, particularly with Orthodox. So there's a lot of synergy. People have family there. They stay there. And, you know, Biden's not getting them out, the Americans out. Now they finally announced, well, maybe we'll get you to Europe. But what do you, I mean, they don't want to be in Europe. They want to be home. So I just, we're leading in Florida. I just signed an executive order. We're going to be sending our own planes, and we're going to be bringing people right back to Florida. You know, you can't just sit around waiting for things to happen. You got to make things happen. So we'll do, and I think that'll light a fire. So not only will it help the Floridians get back, but I'll bet you some other people get back sooner as a result of what we did. So you know, that's just what it's all about. That you just got to figure out what you got to do.
Catch up.
You got to lead. You got to lead. Well, you know, it's like Saturday morning. You know, this happened like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. They didn't even wake him up, Biden. He slept the whole time. And it's just like, you know, well, he's an old man. You deserve a president that's going to take that 2 a.m. phone call. And it's going to be there for you and not let down. You know, we have to do that in Florida. We have hurricanes. We have things like that. You just got to go. That's the time that the leadership is really necessary. So he had been really missing in action during the weekend. And that's just not what we need. It's an important time in history. So we're acting.
Can I just say thank you for doing that? My husband and I were just in Israel in the end of August, and we fell in love with a lot of the people there, and we received messages from our Israel group on Saturday morning, and ever since, you know, it's been really sobering to hear the things going on, and also really devastating to hear that some of them feel as if they've been abandoned. They have been. So just thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah, no, we're happy to do it. I mean, I think you know, we've got a number of great allies in the world. They're clearly one of our best allies. It's a difficult part of the world, for sure. They're the one country we can always count on in that part of the world. And we have great economic relations. I mean, in Florida, I started really doing a lot with them when I first became governor. You know, we do things like restore the Florida Everglades. We work on getting algae out of Lake Okeechobee, the big lake in the southern part of Florida. And I've got Israeli companies there doing algae, getting the algae, because we've had this. We have Israeli companies involved with doing things for Alzheimer's and for brain cancer and stuff. So we've developed a great economic relationship, but and education, our universities, but we really have very strong cultural ties, because you know, that's the birthplace of really Western civilization. You look at what happened in the Holy Land, and then what happened in Athens, Rome, and all then through Enlightenment that led to our country. So that's something that's really meaningful, and you see the connections. And then we've got folks you know, over there that, you know, they know that they're always under siege. I mean, that's just kind of what it's like when and it's important to get the history right. You know, there was never a Palestinian state, ever. There was a partition plan presented in the late 40s that would have done an Arab state and a Jewish state. Israel accepted it, the Arabs rejected it, and they went to war against Israel to try to snuff out Israel in the crib, and Israel won that war. Then in the 67, the Arab armies were going to invade Israel, preempted it, won the Six-Day War. Then in 73, the Arab armies stormed to try to annihilate Israel. Israel won that. And then they faced a series of terror, waves of terror attacks over many decades, intifadas, all these other things. And then they've offered like really, really generous concessions for a Palestinian Arab state. Honestly, it's concessions that a lot of people said would put Israel in a very precarious situation from a security perspective, yet they still offered, and they wouldn't accept, the Palestinian Arabs wouldn't accept. And then why won't they accept? Because ultimately, they don't want their own state as much as they want to annihilate and eradicate the Jewish state. That's what they want to do. That's Hamas, what they want to do. They want to just wipe it off the map. And, you know, Hamas was elected in the Gaza Strip. Israel is not occupying the Gaza Strip. They pulled out of there in 2005. And the people there have had an opportunity to make something, and they've decided to cast their lot in with Hamas. And so it's created this dysfunctional society. There's a lot of hatred. And then to to launch terror attacks is bad enough, but then to be decapitating babies, to be executing elderly people, filming executions and putting it, they're literally emailing the executions to family members, putting it on social media so the family members see this. Imagine if you saw a loved one, you go on your Facebook and someone took like your mother or grandmother's Facebook and posted a video, and you think it's your grandmother posting and it's her assassination by terrorists. I mean, like, really, really evil stuff. So that's what's happened. So we just, we need to have some moral clarity here, and that's what you'll get out of me for sure.
Well, Ron, what do you think about?
We also have to look at what's been going on in Washington for really many years with really horrendous policy, starting with COVID, starting with spending trillions and trillions and printing trillions and trillions of dollars. Of course, you are going to get inflation, you're going to get higher prices, you're going to get supply chain problems, higher interest rates. That is all induced by government. That is all induced by politicians, and it's both parties, Republicans and Democrats. I'm sorry to say, that's just the reality. So, we need to do like we do in Florida. In Florida, we've had record tax cuts. We have no income tax. You all should try that sometime. It works well. I know your governor's trying to do it, and I think maybe you'll get there, hopefully. So I can tell you, you'll have more people moving from Illinois if you get rid of your income tax. I know that. Well, some of them want to vote the right way, so we'll see. But so we did that, cut taxes, run surpluses. We've actually paid down almost 25% of our state's total outstanding debt that we've had since the history of state, the time we were a state. And so you can do it. It can work. So we need to reel in how the federal government's spending money. That means you got to be willing to veto big bloated spending bills as the president. We'll fight that. Yeah. It means you got to, if you want to crack down on the higher prices, you need to take all the Bidenomics and all the bureaucracy he's done, rip it out and throw it in the trash can on day one, and we'll do that. You also need to rein in the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve expanded the money supply so much, and then they didn't do anything to taper that, and then now they've been raising interest rates because inflation got out of control. So we're now in a situation, if you bought a house 5 years ago, average home price, and you needed to buy the average home price. Now, yeah, the top line price has gone up, but because interest rates are over 8% now, you're paying over twice as much for a monthly mortgage payment than you would have 4 or 5 years ago. Are people's incomes raising twice? No, that's not happening. So you say that's cost prohibitive. People are struggling to meet the groceries, which are probably twice as much as they were 4 or 5 years ago. Then you have, if you want to buy a car, all these things, cars are up 70%, all these things. So the American dream is really slipping away from families all across this country because of what the government has done. So we need to restore the American dream. Part of what we need to recognize, though, is, we can't just have the same people up there all the time. We need term limits for members of Congress. We need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And we do need a line item veto for the president. Joe Biden just announced $100 million of your taxpayer dollars going to the Gaza Strip. They say it's humanitarian assistance. We know Hamas is going to commandeer that money, and Hamas is going to use it to advance terrorism. I say no U.S. tax dollars to the Gaza Strip. We still have hostages being held by Hamas. There are American hostages being held by Hamas. How are you funding them when they're holding Americans as well as others hostage? I challenge every Republican running, step up to the plate, join me in opposing Biden's $100 million gift to Hamas.
Eric's bombing in 1983 that killed over 240 U.S. Marines. When I was in Iraq in 2007 and 8, there was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. There were a lot of groups. The number one source of combat deaths while I was there was Iranian-backed Shia militias killing American troops. They killed hundreds of our service members, probably over 1,000 throughout the course of the Iraq campaign. That's just what they do. So when you loosen the screws on them, they're going to take that money and it's going to be plowed into terrorism. And that was a choice that Biden made because he thinks he can get a deal with Iran. You're not going to get a deal that's worth anything with a regime that chants death to America as their calling card. So let's get real on this stuff. Turn off the money going to Iran, snapback sanctions, oil sanctions, all that stuff. The world will be a better place when that regime goes bankrupt, and that's what we need to do. When I saw what happened in Israel, one of the first things I thought about is Israel has some of the strongest border security in the world. Do you think our enemies have not been exploiting our open border in this country over the last 2.5 years? We've had over 7 million people come illegally into the country, and it's not all people from Central America. We've had people from Iran. We've had people from China, Russia, other places in the Middle East. We've had people, over 100 people on the terrorist watch list come into the country illegally. We've had criminal aliens. We've had cartels trafficking people. You name it, it's happened. So that is a huge national security risk to this country. I said publicly on numerous occasions before Hamas attacked Israel that there would be, and I'm not wishing this, I hope I'm wrong, but the math doesn't lie. There's going to be a terrorist attack in this country that we're going to be able to trace back to that open southern border. So again, massive problems in this country that are self-inflicted by these failed politicians. So, and we've heard a lot about the border over many, many years. I've been hearing about this border for 15 years, 20 years. Republicans, I mean, Democrats don't really care about it anymore, but Republicans always talk about it. We still have a problem. I'm going to be the president that's finally going to finish the issue once and for all. We're going to get the job done. And we're going to do it by this. We're going to declare it to be a national emergency on day one. I'm going to marshal all available resources, including our U.S. military, to be on that border and stop the invasion cold. And you have to have a policy that people that come illegally, they need to be sent back to their home country. Otherwise, you're never going to fix the problem. We will build the wall, and we will have Mexico pay for the wall. And now listen, I remember I went to those rallies in 2016. I was excited by, of the three things I was probably most excited about those rallies were drain the swamp. That didn't happen. It got worse. Special counsel for Hillary, hold her accountable. That didn't happen. Let her off the hook. And then the third, and maybe the most important for me, was build the wall, have Mexico pay for it. Now, Trump was in Iowa a couple weeks ago, and he actually addressed this because, people say, well, why didn't you do it? And what he said was, well, there was no legal mechanism he had to make Mexico pay. He said, you can't just tell them pay. How do you do that? Now, that wasn't what he said in 2016. In 2016, he said Mexico will pay. But here's the thing. You actually can make Mexico pay. You just need to know how to use the levers of power. Yes, they're not going to just give you money. Of course not. The way you have Mexico pay and other countries pay, you impose fees on the remittances that people send back from the United States to Mexico and Central America. It's $90 billion a year. Even a relatively small fee generates billions of dollars to go straight into the construction of that border wall, and we will finish that job, and I will get the job done. So, I like to tell people I'm the only one running who 100% of the promises I've made as governor I've delivered on, and I will deliver on my promises as president. But you know what? I'm going to do even better than that. I'm going to deliver on other people's promises too. So I will get that done. So where do we find ourselves now? Chaos abounds. Dangers are gathering. America lacks direction, and leadership is in short supply. The world is getting more dangerous as conflicts mount. We have a major national security issue in our own country at our own southern border. We've had 7 to 8 million people pour into this country illegally since Joe Biden took office. They are not all coming from Mexico and Central America. They are coming from all over the world, from the Middle East, from Russia, from China. Do you think for a minute that America's enemies are not taking advantage of that porous southern border? So dealing with that border is not just the right thing for the United States in terms of the rule of law and our economy. It is a national security issue, and it's one that we need to tackle. The Hamas terrorist attack against Israel raises yet another front in global conflict. How did this happen? It happened because Iran funded and orchestrated the attack against the people of Israel. And this is the most deadly attack, terrorist attack on record, and there were more Jews killed on October 7th than at any time since the Holocaust. We just commemorated last week the 40th anniversary, actually this week, the 40th anniversary of the Marine Corps barracks bombing in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983. That attack was done, orchestrated by Hezbollah and the Iranians to kill Americans. And when I was in Iraq, Iran was killing our troops left and right. So they have a long history of fomenting jihad throughout the Middle East and killing not just Jews, but Americans. It's important that we say as Americans that Israel has the right to fully defend itself against these barbarous attacks. You can't just sit there and have a terrorist group on your border who's going to behead your babies, rape women, and massacre elderly people and think that you can do a glancing blow and somehow that's going to take care of it. They need to end Hamas once and for all, and we should be supportive of that, not just publicly, but also in private, not just in words, but also in our deeds. It's important that we do it. The Hamas attacks against Israel has taken some of the focus off the war in Europe. Biden invited the Russian invasion of Ukraine through his weakness, and now his policy is basically seeking a blank check to continue a policy that has no identifiable endgame. Biden's also funding both sides of this conflict. His deferential posture to Iran has given them billions of dollars in sanctions relief. They have plowed that not just for terrorism in the Middle East, they're also plowing it into helping Russia with things like drones. And his Green New Deal policies also benefits Russia, which relies on energy production. Now, Heritage has correctly pointed out how it's in America's interest to bring this conflict to an acceptable conclusion, to stop the decimation of our weapons reserves, and to focus our forces where they are most needed. And I think that is the right approach, and I commend Heritage for saying it. And so what is that right approach? Where are our forces needed? China is the key player behind both of those foreign conflicts. The CCP is keeping both Iran and Russia afloat financially. China's purchasing massive amounts of Iranian oil on the black market, thereby enriching the mullahs. And Russia is selling China gas and much, much more, and that is bolstering Russia's war machine. Now, but one of the things that I think people started to think about when they saw the attack and kind of it settled in about what happened, Israel's got probably the strongest border security in the world, and yet this was able to happen. What is going to happen with our country with an open border? I mean, do you not think our enemies have wanted to utilize that over the last 2.5? Of course they have. We know people from Iran have come in, and China, and Russia, and the Middle East. There's people 140 on the terror watch list that we know of have come through the southern border. So, and there will be, as much as I hate to say it, and I hope to God I'm wrong, but I'm not, there's going to be a terrorist attack in this country that we're going to be able to trace back to the southern border at some point in the future. Just the math doesn't lie. You can't have this many people coming in. So we need to get smart about what we're doing. You can't just have your country where the inmates are running the asylum. You can't let the Mexican drug cartels rule the roost. You've got to defend this country. We will do that for sure. But we also have to be smart about who we're letting in knowingly and legally. You know, this idea that anyone can come anywhere in the world,
I don't think is in the best interest of this country. That's why I was the first person of note to come out and say, because you had some of these people, these very far left, saying we should import hundreds of thousands of refugees from the Gaza Strip. I said no to that. That is not in this country's interest. Because I remember after September 11th, 2001, when terrorists knocked down the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, I recall Israel standing in solidarity, every country in Europe, heck, even Russia and China were not openly celebrating it. You know, the one that I remember celebrating it were Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria. I remember that very distinctly. It was a searing memory to see that happen. And so people will say in the media, and some politicians say, well, you know, not everyone in the Gaza Strip is a terrorist. Not everyone in the Gaza Strip is Hamas. Well, look, they elected Hamas. I mean, let's just be honest. They were cheering in the street after October 11th attack. They were very supportive of that. But the question about who you're importing into the country, the threshold just can't be, are you a terrorist or not? Because there's a lot of bad that can come from people that may not quite be to that level. And what I pointed out here is what they've done. And people will say that Israel is occupying Gaza. They pulled out of Gaza in 2005. They forcibly uprooted their own Israeli citizens and removed them. It was a very traumatic thing. So the people of Gaza had a choice about, okay, you're governing yourself. What do you want to do? Do you want to build an economy, build opportunity? No, they elected Hamas. Money that goes in there, Hamas uses it to finance tunnels and terrorist infrastructure, rockets. That's what's happened. That's the choice that they made. And so you're in a situation where, yes, it's not a question of terrorists or not. Of course you don't let in a terrorist. But they are taught in the Gaza Strip to hate Jews. They are taught to hate Israel. They are taught that Israel should not exist. The textbooks that they use does not even have Israel on the map. So they're conditioning each generation to basically seek a second Holocaust. So to bring in people with that, even if you're not a member of Hamas, I don't want to import those pathologies from the Middle East into this country. That will increase anti-Semitism in this country if you do it, and it will increase anti-Americanism in this country if you do it. And we've got to stop being politically correct about this and start calling a spade a spade. And we definitely don't want to be like Europe. I mean, look at what Europe has done with its immigration, knowingly importing millions and millions of people who reject their culture and are trying to bring in their own culture and all the dysfunction of that. So now you look at a place like Germany, they have more anti-Semitism today than at any time since Adolf Hitler. And that is anti-Semitism that's largely been imported into their country by really, really stupid politicians. And so we're gonna keep this country safe. We're gonna keep this country secure. But there are elites around the world, and there are elites here who are willing to do very dumb things, and that puts our people at risk. We're not gonna. We've got a lot in store in the home stretch here. I've been watching what's been happening with the Biden administration vis-a-vis Israel, and I think they're doing everything they can to try to kneecap them. I mean, calling for possible ceasefires and all these other things. That is not what we need if we want Israel to be able to do the job. And so I'm concerned about what I'm seeing out of Washington. I think they're trying to thread a political needle that you just can't thread. You're either for Israel defending itself or you're not. And now's the time we got to support defending them. If you're concerned about anything happening in Gaza, the answer to that is to call for Hamas's unconditional surrender and call for the release of all hostages. But I don't see a lot of those people doing that. So let's just understand who's at fault here, and let's understand who has a right to defend themselves.
So, coming back locally, now we're from Blue Radio, Nebraska. Coming up is what you guys are doing, practicing here in Iowa.
What she said, let's go ahead and go on. But no, she's been a great First Lady of Florida, and you saw our 3 kids come out here for a cameo, ages 6, 5, and 3. Just be rest assured, when we're in the White House, the only thing our kids are going to be bringing back is homework, not cocaine. So don't worry about any of that.
our kids they're Florida natives, of course, and they've never seen snow in their lives. And so we figure over the next couple months, when we're working Iowa, that we will probably come in contact with that, and they'll be able to throw some snowballs and stuff. I know a lot of Midwesterners, but it's usually in December and January. It's because they're down in Naples and Marco Island vacationing for the winter. That's how I see most of the Midwesterners. But it's going to be good to be here, and we're really excited about the next 2 months leading into the Iowa caucus. I'm running for president because, as Casey said, we're in jeopardy of being the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids an America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And if we allow that to happen, we'll be breaking faith with every generation of Americans from the inception of our country to the present, who've always been willing to stand up, fight, and sacrifice so that the next generations would have opportunities and that the Republic could endure. So I'm not going to sit idly by and watch the managed decline of this country. I am not going to sit there and allow these elites to continue to drive it into the ground. We need to do something about it. We need to stop this decline. We need to put this country on a different trajectory. We need to usher in an American revival, and we need a new birth of freedom all throughout this country. I appreciate that a lot of people have fled to Florida since I've been on.
Governor, you've made China a serious, the center of your foreign policy. As president, would you ever consider meeting with President Xi?
Look, when you're president, you deal with people. You don't just deal with your best friends. You've got to be able to deal with everybody. But how you do that, I think, is important. For example, I would not have done what Donald Trump did with our friend from North Korea, Kim Jong-un. I think there was no precondition set. They went, and you're not going to win these guys over with like personal charm. I mean, these guys are killers, and they have certain interests and certain worldviews. So you got to know that going in, and you got to condition so that you're going to be able to deliver results. I don't think Biden really delivered much in terms of results for whatever he just did with Xi. I think that their view of China is much more rosy than what it should be, and I think that that's hurt our country in many different respects.
Governor Randall.
We're not ready.
So I think all those are great points. So first, people Biden's let in, I'm sending them back. They should go back. I mean, like they came in, they get registered when they come in, all this stuff. I mean, you do it. I mean, you've got to work. I mean, Eisenhower did it in the 50s. You can do. But you're right. We've had people from Iran, from China, from Russia, from the Middle East that have come through that border. And I've made the point that, of course, terrorists have come across the border. Media's like, oh, that's not true. Well, first of all, our own government has said that we have hundreds from the terror watch list, but that's just who we know. We know there's a lot more that we don't know. But what are the odds that you could have 8 million people and not have somebody who wanted to be involved in terror? Of course you're going to have that. I mean, so, yes, there are people here, and I've said publicly that there will be an attack on this country that we'll be able to trace back to the border at some point in the future. It's sad to say. I wish that wasn't the case, but the math doesn't lie when you're that reckless. So I do think you got to find and send back, because I think it's a security risk to let in people you don't even know who they are. When we used to do immigration, like people came to Ellis Island, right? If you had any problem, they would just send you back. Like if you said you were a communist, you got sent back. If you couldn't work to support yourself, they would just send you back. And that was like legal. Now we're letting all these other people in. So we just can't do that. In terms of the military, on day one as commander-in-chief, we rip out all the woke and we throw it in the trash can. We're going to be done with it. We're going to focus on the people. And what that'll do is, because I have veterans come up to me all too often now, and they say they tell me they wouldn't want their kids or grandkids to join the military right now, given what's going on. Because you have an agenda. A lot of these civilian leaders are putting an agenda into the military. The fact that we're even talking about pronouns in the military, and I've talked to people come up to me very quietly on activities like, yeah, I've done more training on pronouns than I have on actual mission accomplishment in the last 9 months. That is intolerable. What that does is that kills morale. It kills morale to do the CRT and the DE&I stuff. Military advancement should be based purely on merit. You earn it. That's the only reason. There should not be any of the political considerations. That's what you got to do.
that increases morale when you return to that. And I think what will happen is, because you think about it, how many of you are veterans in here? A lot of you are? Okay. And it's often said that a veteran is somebody who at one time in their life wrote a check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including that individual's life. And the reason is when you sign up, put on the uniform, it doesn't even matter what you're doing. You could be a Navy SEAL, you could be somebody who's on a ship, somebody who's on stateside. You just never know what's going to happen, where they're going to send you. And you are putting your life in the hands of these commanders and these civilian leaders. And I think people are willing to do that because they believe in this country and when they have faith that we're focused on mission. Because I can tell you, when I was in Iraq, we didn't let these agendas shape the things that we're doing. If people bring their own agenda or have their own way of doing it without focusing on mission first, people die. So you've got to do that. That's the whole purpose. I think they're less likely to want to join if they think that the accomplishment of the mission is not the most important goal to some of the leadership. If they see all these other things and they think about, okay, well, I'm getting in the crosshairs for this, when